Okay, we're going to show you some proper scope mounting techniques. Now, obviously you want to make sure your firearm is unloaded. And for this demonstration, we're going to assume that you've already determined the correct base and ring heights for your particular firearm and scope combination. So the first thing we want to do is we want to place the gun in the gun vise, have it secured well. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to remove our plug screws. On this one we're going to be using a one-piece mount, so we've only removed 3 plug screws and we left the one in the rear intact. Next we want to degrease everything very well. And I'm going to start out, I'm going to degrease the top of the receiver. And I'm going to degrease the holes also. And we're going to do the same thing with the mount. We're going to degrease the bottom of that. I'm going to put it in place on top of the rifle. And we're also going to degrease our screws. We do that so it gives you a better feel on the torque, and the screws will tighten up properly. Now we want to just start our screws in. You can use Loctite on this if you prefer. And if you're going to use Loctite, this gel is a great way to go. It keeps the Loctite from running all over the place. And if you are going to use a liquid, just put a very, very tiny drop on the screw itself before you put it into the hole. And we're going to just put these screws down to where they're just slightly snug. Okay, at this point, something I like to do is I like to check my bolt travel, because occasionally you'll get in a situation where a screw may be too long and it'll go in there and lock up the bolt. Now I'm going to go back and I'm going to tighten the base down securely. And I do this in a sequence. I start with the middle screw, then I go to the rear screw, and then I go to the front screw. And I just keep repeating that until I have all 3 of the screws snugged down tight. Okay, we got the base on. Now we're going to set the rings. Okay, these are a dovetail style ring. And what this is, you have a dovetail on the bottom of the ring and you have a slot in your base. Now I put a little bit of lubricant on this dovetail and we set it down into the slot, and then this ring has to turn on the base. Now there's several ways you can do this. You can use a scope alignment rod. You can use the handle off of a screwdriver. What you don't want to do is use your scope tube to do that. It'll damage your scope. What I use is just a basic old crescent wrench that I put some tape on to pad the jaws to keep from marring the ring. So we're going to turn that ring like so. And then our back ring, this has a notch on each side on the base that corresponds with these 2 screws. And we're going to set it on, and we're just going to finger tighten these screws to hold that ring in place. And if you kind of wiggle it a little bit, you can feel it drop into those notches. Okay, now we're going to remove the top halves of our rings. And I usually grab it with my fingers like this and put upward pressure and pull the screws, because I want the screws to stay in place. And I want to set the ring top down so that I know exactly how it came off of the bottom part of the ring. All right, now we're going to degrease our ring bases. We'll set our scope in place. And we want to check our placement of our rings on our scope too. You don't want it too far forward or too far rearward so it's cramped up against the bell on the scope, either front or rear. If it does that, it'll cause damage to the scope. Then we'll take our ring halves and place them back on the top of the scope just like we took them off. And we'll just start the screws into them. Okay, I've got everything started. The scope is still loose, so I want to tighten up just enough to put a slight amount of tension on that tube so it'll hold it in place. Okay, now we need to check everything for eye relief. So we'll take the gun out of the cradle, we'll sight through the scope, set our eye relief, and we want to line the crosshairs up straight. And the best way to do that is a vertical line on a wall, such as a doorway or a piece of paneling, something like that. And we want to check our crosshairs first straight. Once we have everything lined up, we'll put it back in the gun cradle. Now we can tighten everything back down. We want to do the same thing with the ring screws that we did with our mount screws. All we want to do is just snug them to begin with. Okay, to fully tighten them, we want to start from one side, just snug it, go to the other side, tighten it, and back and forth until you have everything tightened down. Okay, we have everything tight. Now you can go back and put a drop of oil along the base where you had already degreased it, possibly put a drop on the screws, and it'll wick itself back in and everything will be good to go. And you're ready to bore sight it and go to the range.